Peeping Tom by Jesse Pullins. I'm a peeping Tom. Been peeping for years. I'm sure I'm not someone you want to hear from, but I don't have anybody else to talk to. You know, if I could just get this off my chest, that'll be good enough for me. I'm not sure how much worse this is gonna get. I'll start from the beginning so I can try to answer as many questions as possible before it's too late. I don't think that I have much time left. I love to watch. I haven't always been this way. It's something that just sort of happened. You know, it started innocently enough. I guess as innocent as peeping toms can be. It was curiosity at first, that and, you know, other people's inability to close their blinds. I've never hurt anybody though. I've never stalked someone in the street. I don't really use social media. Everything I've done has been done discreetly from the windows of my home. I don't take pictures or record. I'm there in the moment, you know, just watching other people's movements. I live in a nice condo on the second floor. My building runs parallel to the one across from me with a little sidewalk courtyard deal filling the space between. It's a nice community. I've lived there for a couple of years now. I work remotely, freelance, it's graphic design. I make pretty good money and, you know, it all gets done on my desktop. I don't really have any friends. Mostly just clients and colleagues from work. They mainly reach out to me when they need my opinion on a piece or they want to do a collab or something, you know, which is fine with me because I don't really like to go out. Almost everything I need can be bought online and delivered to my door, you know, so before this started, I was totally content with my boring introvert life. I never bothered anybody and nobody ever bothered me. Just plain and simple. Now, that was the case until the Jeffersons moved across the courtyard. Their name isn't, you know, really the Jeffersons, obviously. That's just what I call them for simplicity's sake. And the Jeffersons were your average young American family. Hardworking husband and wife with a little girl. I'll call them Harry and Rebecca. The little girl could be Julie. You know, when they moved in, I watched from behind the blinds like your stereotypical nosy neighbor, just trying to see who exactly is joining the community. Everybody does it. And before this, the only thing that I could gaze out the window at was this stray cat that sometimes lingered around. It was a little calico that had been there since before I started living there. I started calling him Cooper, you know. I would have taken him in, you know, if I wasn't allergic. At first, that's all it was. My time watching the Jeffersons changed slowly over time. I wasn't just waiting there with my coffee creeping from day one. You know, after they moved in, I would see them in passing. Out of the window, of course, because, you know, I never really left my home to begin with. The sliding door to their balcony was my dominant view most of the time, as they mostly keep their blinds open to let the natural sunlight in. This kind of let me see their whole living room. I was very discreet when I watched, and I always watched the same way on the right side of the window and a crack at the very end of the blinds. And I always kept my blinds closed, mostly to keep the light out. Once I started watching them more frequently, I decided it would indeed be problematic if I was caught, you know, hence the whole discretion thing. Harry was tall and handsome. Dirty blonde hair, fairly muscular. He worked construction or something like it, you know, like a regular 9-to-5 kind of guy. His routine was mostly the same. He'd go to work, come home, shower, help his wife with dinner, dishes, spend time with family until it was time for bed. Basic. Rebecca worked from home. It was some kind of like an online perfume trade or something, I think. She was a natural blonde, like her husband, and just very fit, you know. I imagine this came from several at-home workout regimes she followed at home. I didn't really watch for perversion, to be clear. I watched out of, I guess admiration? Maybe? I imagine I wasn't the only one watching her occasionally, you know, but still probably the only one watching the most. Julie spent her days playing with toys and watching cartoons. It was kind of amusing to see her on her adventures, running around with her imagination running wild. Sometimes when they came home from running errands in town, Julie would see Cooper trotting from the bushes, meowing as he went. So she'd kind of stop and scratch him behind the ears before her parents called her into the house. Part of me kind of wished they would adopt him. The three of them settled in nicely, like a little puzzle piece that was just missing from the community. Over time, I grew fond of this family, and what started as a glance or two turned into checking in daily. It was daily. Outside my private routine of online design and clients, the Jeffersons provided a great distraction from the monotony. They seemed so alive to me. I was captivated by their existence. These very real people in their day-to-day lives, something Hollywood tries so hard to replicate. There was no acting here. There was no scripts. Just like watching ants, Weeks of watching turned to months, and I got to know them quite well. In time, I would start to see patterns in the dinners they would make, the TV shows they would watch. I noticed when one of them had a particularly bad day, and eventually I would be able to see an argument coming. But overall, the Jeffersons were a pretty happy family from the outside view. And by the time I realized I was perhaps watching a little too much, I found myself unable to stop. Over time, I watched them more and more. I would try to blaze through my work every day so I could get as much viewing time as I could. I would always break it up in segments. I wouldn't stand there all day. I would at least pretend I had interests of my own. I tried to get some other hobbies, video games, writing, knitting. I tried to binge TV series online and stuff so I could just get invested in another story, but I always found my way back to my bedroom window, peeking through the blinds. After all, I was already pulled into a story, and this one really never ran out of content. I watched all the time. I monitored Rebecca and her online perfume sales. And when she seemed to be better, I found myself sharing her excitement. To my surprise, she started crocheting as well. I got to watch her go from an amateur to building really impressive skill, And when Julie would play around the house, I would sometimes play along, try to imagine the kind of story she was unfolding. She started to draw colorful pictures with crayons and markers. I bought this little monocular online so I could see the ones her parents put on the fridge. Harry picked up new hobbies as well. He started buying and indulging in more craft beers. At one point, he picked up wood carving. I chuckle at his crude starting sculptures, and I would wince and get saddened when he slipped and cut himself. When Julie got a little older, Harry and Rebecca started to have planned date nights, and Julie would stay the night with the family, They'd get all done up, go out all excited, and come home a little drunk and smiling, pop bottles of wine, have one last beer, laughing and caressing as they made their way to the couch. Most of the time they would close the blinds. Sometimes they did not. About 2 years went by as I enjoyed our little relationship. I was like their little secret admirer, I know this sounds disturbing, okay? And I do feel some guilt for seeing as much as I have, but they never saw me, and I never tried to contact them. I never sent them gifts. I never tried to break the ice. Even though I knew enough about them, it would probably be easy to befriend them. I just wanted to continue my little watch from the bedroom window party, This changed, however, the day that I saw the moving truck parked in the lot. I grieved the departure of the Jeffersons like the loss of a loved one. They packed quickly, and before I had time to come to terms with them leaving, they were gone. Almost as if they were never there to begin with. All I had were the memories of the Jeffersons, and it really kind of pained me deeply when I looked through the slider and their presence was just gone. The walls bare. As the maintenance crew came in and painted and cleaned the carpets, wiping their imprint from the place, I found myself drinking. I was lost in a slump, in the shadows of my own home. they were gone. Therefore, my only hobby was gone, and I realized how truly alone I really was. Things were dark for a time. For a few weeks, the condo across the courtyard was empty. When I wasn't slugging through work, I was laying in bed, wasting the days away without drive or energy. Just I felt like a piece was missing, and I couldn't figure out how to fill the void. One day, another moving truck showed up, accompanied by what looked like a pretty expensive moving crew. And for the first time in a while, I was back at the corner of my window, and I wondered if another tenant was moving out. The men in matching uniforms began unloading lots of exquisite furniture, and kind of much unlike you would normally see around here. They carried it methodically into this empty condo where the Jeffersons had lived, and they positioned it just right. It was a very professional moving job. Very, 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 very professional. And as I looked from my window, I wondered if maybe a movie star had rented the place out. They unloaded and set up in a matter of hours. Once the dishes were placed in the cabinets and the last painting was hung, bam, slammed the shutter on the loading truck, sped off into the night. It's actually very strange. I looked into the newly furnished dark condo with my monocular, trying to check stuff out as they had set it up. Yeah, I'd never really seen anything quite like it, you know. There was this grand leather couch and armchairs, ancient grandfather clock, paintings that must have been worth thousands. I mean, all of it set up perfectly level, truly immaculate. I was so focused looking over the possessions with my little monocular that I jumped when somebody turned the lights on. I pulled the monocular down and looked to see somebody standing in the condo, almost like a statue. A young man stood by the light switch, looking around the room slowly at all of his possessions with this slightest grimace of disgust. He was wearing all black, his skin pale, his eyes sunken. He moped around the condo painfully slow, his head cocked. He was just looking at each furnishing one at a time, and it was strange. His face was mostly void of emotion. He tucked his hands in his pockets and did this through every room. I watched with great interest, almost stunned to see a tenant just so suddenly. I mean, I couldn't deny the excitement I felt, but something was off about that guy. Something that made me really uncomfortable. I couldn't explain it. The incredibly odd fellow took 20 minutes to finish his rounds, and I watched in awe throughout the whole ordeal. When he finished, he stood in the living room once more with this quivering lip drooping into a frown, and he was awkward and strange, but I just couldn't help myself. He just stood there, staring, and I'd felt so starved since the Jeffersons had left. I don't know. I watched him in silence across the courtyard. With what looked like shaking hands, he got his phone out of his pocket and dialed, holding the phone to his ear. And whenever his call connected, he looked like he was mumbling at first, his small words spoken slow. He started shaking his head frantically, blinking his eyes like he was trying to wake from a dream or something. And then without warning, he was holding the phone in front of his mouth, screaming into it. Just raw anger, shouting into the mouthpiece of the phone, just spit flying all over the place, you know. I could read his lips so clearly, it was like I could hear him shouting in my own head, just over and over and over again. He yelled at the person on the other end of the line. I hate it, and I hate you. That's what he said. Suddenly, after another bout of screaming, he looked at the cell phone with pure rage and threw it into his television, sending it crashing through the flat screen. It had to be at least a 70-inch, and now it was just destroyed. I jumped again and decided that I had watched enough for now. Enough. I didn't want him to see me, especially after an outburst like that. I left him to it, and I returned to work, hoping to get through a big project I was dragging my feet on. Local car dealership in town was just going under, new management already looking to take over once they threw in the towel. They wanted a design with this old lot spinning billboard, something sleek and new to scrub out this mom and pop look that it had had before, There was this talk of me doing the layout for their business cards as well if I delivered. All the reason really to climb out of my slump and get back to the grindstone. It would be nice to focus on something constructive. I sat at my computer and I pushed the new neighbor from my mind, plugging away into the night. I worked into the late hours of the night, my mouse and keyboard clicking away as I found the right color scheme and layout on the billboard job. Time had been a blur. I had stopped eventually to brew a new pot of coffee, getting up to refill my mug and take a leak. I checked the time at the bottom corner of my screen. It was 2:23 a.m. My progress had been pretty good, so I decided to call it for the night. I stretched and I headed to the bathroom, sprawling out as soon as I was off my feet. I looked up at the ceiling in the dark, feeling the caress of sleep already luring me. My eyes grew heavy. But before I closed them, I found them drifting to the blinds. I could just take a peek. What would it hurt? He probably wasn't even awake, right? There's no harm in checking, after all. I sat up with a little excitement and creeped to the window and stood in the position that I had done hundreds of times before. I cracked the blinds ever so slightly and I leaned in. As soon as I looked at the condo across the street, goosebumps crawled across my skin. The new tenant was sitting on the couch with the lights off, illuminated only by the glow of his broken TV. The flat screen was a distorted mesh of colors, cracked black and white with rainbow streaks from his tantrum earlier. He just sat there in silence, arms at his side, just blankly staring. His cell phone was still lodged in the screen. I rubbed my eyes in skepticism, thinking maybe I'm hallucinating. I'd been sitting in front of my computer for quite some time. Surely I was just imagining it, But I looked again, and he was still there, frozen on the couch. What the hell was this guy doing? I watched for a while, going back and forth between his dead eyes and the destroyed screen. He didn't move a muscle. It almost looked like he wasn't breathing. It was hard to see with how dark it was. The seconds ticked by as neither of us moved. And this voice in the back of my head just started to nag at me. What if he actually was dead? I remember the monocular on my desk, and I broke my gaze to actually retrieve it. I shivered as I walked to my desk. This unsettling sight sent chills down my spine. I found myself rubbing my arms like the air conditioning had been blasting for far too long. I got the monocular from the desk drawer and quickly returned to the window. Discreetly, of course. I angled it through the crack before looking through it. The looking glass exploded with color, and I realized that I had it far too close to the right side. My entire view, broken flat screen, 100%. I started panning the monocular slowly towards the couch, carefully trying not to rustle the blinds. When I reached the couch, I saw nothing but shining leather. He was gone. I lowered my looking glass in confusion and nearly jumped out of my skin. Standing in front of the sliding door was the tenant, and he was looking right at me. I gasped so loud, and I crouched in a panic, knocking my head on the windowsill, the blinds ruffling slightly. I cursed at myself for being so stupid. I just had to look. I couldn't leave him alone, and now he saw me. I continued to crouch like a coward, and not exactly sure what to do next. In my few years of people watching, I had never been seen. Never. Not once. This guy was full on staring at me. How he knew I was there in the first place, I had no idea. There was no easy way out now. I mean, I had to deal with my situation. Maybe if I tried to play it cool, he wouldn't call the cops, I guess, I didn't really know. After a deep breath, I peeked as slow as I could. He was still there, standing in the dark, staring at my window. Oh, God. Feeling like a piece of shit, I sighed and stood up. I pulled the drawstring for the blinds, held my hands up sheepishly, like, oh, my bad. I held my breath and I waited for a response, but he just stood there, awkwardly. We looked at each other for a time, neither of us really breaking the eye contact. I waited for him to get his phone, call the police, something. And then I remembered that he had thrown it through the TV. I couldn't really make out the details from so far away, but I swore he was smiling, you know? When the uneasiness reached its peak, I kind of just shrugged and waved as if to say, all right, good night then. And then I grabbed the drawstring and let the blinds fall. Felt pretty embarrassing. I didn't really know what else to do. So I backed away from the window and I scurried to the front door, making sure it was locked. It was. My living room was pretty bare. You know, very basic couch, TV setup. The blinds to my balcony are always closed. I don't smoke, so I've never actually really had a reason to go out on it, you know. But with my lights off, my door locked, I stood behind the blinds, wondering if he was still watching. I mulled it over for a while before deciding to look, and I held my breath before peeking. His living room was empty. And I breathed a sigh of relief. I wiped sweat from my brow. You know, I was actually a bit surprised at how worked up I'd gotten. It was probably just an awkward misunderstanding, you know, something. Feeling exhausted over the whole thing, I returned to my bedroom and collapsed on my bed. I laid there for a minute, just tossing and turning restlessly in the dark. The silhouette of the man was still in my head. And I found, well, how do I describe it? Just couldn't really sleep, tossing and turning, you know, restlessly in the dark. Just every time I would get close to drifting off, I thought of him. Eventually, I rolled over and grabbed my phone, started scrolling online for something to give me some peace of mind, you know. Found a decently set of priced blackout curtains, and I purchased those without, you know, thinking. Really deciding I was tired of the blinds. Definitely. Probably tired of peeping altogether, to be honest. I even paid a hefty amount to expedite the shipping. Site said that they would arrive the next day, you know, and I sincerely hoped that they would. The next morning, I awoke disheveled. Throughout the night, I had recurring nightmares of the man across the street, just him and that damn broken TV, you know, with the distorted screen. I kept seeing his shadow in the corner, only to wake in an empty room. I felt ridiculous. After years of watching people, one person watches me and I can't sleep at all. The irony was not lost on me. The vulnerability had changed in me. I almost cowered around the windows when it came time to sit down for work. I found myself looking over my shoulder. Well, there was no one there, of course. I was psyching myself out. In time, I started to focus on work, and I wrapped up the design for the dealership, sent a preview to the client. I ended up scrolling online again after that, you know, browsing for household self-defense. I didn't own a gun or anything for home protection, really, you know, like not even a bat. It kind of felt stupid, but I couldn't help myself. I was still pretty rattled. I added one of those long flashlight baton things and then a taser to the cart, and I expedited the shipping once again. Yep, definitely better than nothing. Later that night, I got a knock at the door. I was on the couch playing on my phone when it happened. You know, the sound nearly made me piss myself. I got up and I tiptoed to the door, almost wanting to not check at all. Looking through the peephole, I saw the delivery driver impatiently waiting for me to sign. Whew, I was still on edge. The sight of him was a relief. I opened the door and I signed for the package. The box was, you know, big and heavy, and I set it on the kitchen table. I opened it quick and saw that it was my blackout curtains. I guess this time the extra money was worth it. A little excited, I opened them up and carried them to my bedroom. They were this thick black canvas, you know, designed to block out direct sunlight. Hopefully they would block out everything else along with it. I got a drill from the closet and I started taking the old blinds down, drawing the screws out one at a time. It wasn't until I was pulling them down that I realized that he was watching me. I couldn't help but jump. I dropped the blinds in a fumbling mess beside him, this grin visible on his face the entire time. He was standing in the living room in front of the slider with the lights on, like he was waiting. How long had he been there? In the background, the flat screen still had the glitched spiderweb from his cell phone. I gave this awkward wave, you know, and tried to go about my business, but I couldn't help but notice he was holding something. something white and rectangular. When he was sure he had my attention, he showed it to me, holding it in front of him so I could see it. It was a large piece of poster board with a simple message drawn with big red letters. I saw you watching me. I put my hands up and I waved them, shaking my head as if to say that there was a misunderstanding, you know? He shook his head, slowly, like I was wrong. I made some more hand gestures to try and convince him, but he started turning the poster board over, which made me stop. There was more writing on the other side. I like to watch, too. I felt the knots in my stomach and the chills tingling down my neck. He was nodding slowly now, this big smile on his face. Panic started to wash over me, and I started to put up the blackout curtains, shaking hands, and he saw me struggling and started to laugh, grabbing this marker while I tried to do this rushed install, you know, and he started scribbling with the cap in his mouth, and I started running the screws above the window to speed the process up, and I ran the screws through the curtains themselves and into the drywall, whirring the drill wildly while he scribbled. It was a hack job, but it would suffice. He put the poster board against the glass as I half-assedly draped the curtains and the screws. I only saw a glimpse before shutting down the view completely. See you soon. I backed away from the window and did the same as the night before. The door was locked and I had shut off all the lights. I didn't want him to see anything. I thought about calling the police, but I decided against it. You know, I thought back to all the times that my windows, watching the Jeffersons, dozens of times, hundreds, and, you know, in a way, I felt like I deserved this. I did. I deserved this. I spent all night huddled in my bed, my desk chair propped in front of my bedroom door. I didn't sleep. Every creak in the building or gust of wind sounded sinister. I looked at the bedroom window throughout the night, just wondering if he was watching behind it, you know. The need to look nagged at me throughout the night, but I fought against it. When daytime came, I was too tired to work and too anxious to eat. I laid on the couch for a while like a slug, you know, kind of unsure what to do. I moped around the house for a while, avoiding the windows. I tried to watch TV, but it couldn't really hold my attention. I'm not sure how much time went by. The last thing I remember was checking the app for my online purchases, and there was this alert telling me my package was a few hours away from delivery. I snuggled up on the couch, and I decided just to wait for it, and I ended up falling asleep. It was nighttime when I awoke to a faint flashing light. I was in the dark on the couch. My light's still off from the morning. The light was blinking from under my front door. It's like a repetitive flash that flashed into my dark living room, you know. Disoriented, I shambled from the couch and turned on the lights. Against my better judgment, I looked in the peephole, only to see an empty hallway. I opened the door to see what the source of the light was. There was a small black trash bag on my doorstep, shining light, just shooting from small holes where it was tied off. I stared at it for a while, the light just blinking over and over again. I looked down the hallway, and there was nobody there, you know. I picked up the bag, and whatever was in there, strangely shaped and stiff. There's really no way to tell what it was by feeling it, you know. I just had to open it. I had to open it. I wish to God that I didn't. I brought the bag to the kitchen table and opened it with a knife. As soon as I punctured the plastic, this foul smell filled my apartment, and then the knife came back sticky and red. I didn't want to open it. But my hands just did it, and the more that I pulled apart the bag, the worse it got. The overhead light illuminated the contents clearly, and I collapsed next to the kitchen table. Dry, gagging first, you know. And then the tears and uncontrollable sobbing. Stuffed in the bloody trash bag was Cooper, the stray cat. His fangs and jaws forced open into this petrified cry. The long flashlight baton was shoved down his throat, and the lens was just strobing endlessly from his gaping mouth. The packaging recipient was stuffed in the bag too. It was this crude note scribbled with all caps. Why won't you let me watch? I don't know what to do now. I left Cooper in the sink, and I'm cowering in my room. I want to call the police. I just can't. Part of me thinks that this is just punishment for all the things I've done, the privacy of others that I've violated over the years. Maybe I do deserve whatever comes next. I thought I heard something on the balcony earlier. I wanted to go look, but I was too scared. I ended up just staying in my room. When things got quiet, I wrote this. It was a strange sound now that I think about it. It was like shuffling, but it had to be wind or something. I live on the second floor. Yeah, there's no way it was anything else. There was this loud snapping noise too, like a crackling over and over again. It was very, very weird. It's been a couple hours. The sun is starting to come up. I'm gonna post this and get dressed. I decided to come clean and go to the police. Yeah, I'm gonna tell them about the Jeffersons and I'm gonna tell them about the guy across the courtyard, Cooper, everything, all of it. I'm gonna tell them all of it, and I just hope that they can help me. The only thing that's bothering me is I haven't used my balcony in a really long time. I can't actually remember the last time. I hope it's still locked.